Here, stories aren't just for entertainment, they're meant to crawl under your skin and stay with you. Every tale I write is born from a twisted thought, a strange whisper, or an uncomfortable silence. If you're into psychological horror and the kind of stories that haunt you long after they end, you're in the right place. Enjoy, my friends. And thank you for the support. And most importantly, never trust what seems normal. Night Screams, translated, never a good sign to wake up in an unfamiliar room, eyes adjusting to his dimly lit surroundings. That's exactly what Nicholas Oldsson found himself in, a room he'd never seen before in his life. Calmly looking around the room, Nick tried to get a bearing on the situation. This wasn't the first time he'd woken up in an unfamiliar place, though usually he'd find himself in an apartment with some woman he hung out with the day before, or a drunk tank at the local precinct. This room, though, almost seemed like a strange mix of the two. While the room was mostly uniform in color, solid grays being the color of choice, and sterile, it also had more of a hotel feel to it. Bed, TV, night table, mini fridge, the usual. Nick scratched the back of his head and closed his eyes, trying to think back to the night before, but he could only get glimpses of memories through his current haziness, nothing that would explain where he was. Stiffly, Nick sat up from the bed and did his best to look around for any clues. He started with the immediate, his personal being. A moment of confusion twisted Nick's face as he looked down at his gray shirt and matching gray pants. Prison, maybe? Some sort of uniform, he thought to himself, checking his pockets for anything useful, but finding them empty. He swore under his breath. What the hell's going on? Nick began to feel anxious, having more questions than answers. Nick noticed a mirror across the room and walked closer to inspect himself further. Nothing out of the ordinary. His short black hair and trimmed beard were fully intact. His blue eyes scanned for any sort of anomaly, a tag, a bracelet, a brand, a bruise, a mark, anything. To his knowledge, beyond the clothes on his back, nothing was out of the ordinary. With a quick hum, the television across from the bed turned on, startling Nick. On screen, a 3D logo Nick didn't recognize, rotated on a gray background with a 3-minute countdown. The logo consisted of multiple rings overlapping with an eye in the center, like the one you'd find on an American dollar. No, I'm done with this. Too weird for me, Nick decided, as he went for what seemed to be the front door, only for the handle to not budge. Yep, prison, he swore again. Nick sat back down on the bed, putting his face in his hands. The lack of windows should have been the clue. Raising his head, he surveyed the room once more. On second glance, there were too many liabilities in the room for it to be a prison, he decided. The bedsheets, the wire for the mini-fridge, the breakable mirror, too many risks to take on a prisoner. Where then? Why? Nick thought to himself. Nick turned his attention to the timer on screen, counting down its final moments. I guess I'll see. At 0, a chime came from the TV, one that sounded vaguely like some sort of news jingle that you'd hear between segments, or in a cheesy company training video. A woman in a pure white dress appeared on the screen, a stark contrast to the constant use of gray. Her blonde hair fell past her shoulders, piercing blue eyes directly fixed into the camera. Her voice came through, practiced and purposeful. Hello, candidates. You may be wondering where you are and what's going on, she explained, in a neutral, yet comforting tone. You have been given the rare opportunity to better your current circumstances. We at Sarastros Recruitment have partnered up with Umberlith Holdings to conduct the interview process for the position of CEO. Due to your affinities, attributes, and talents, you have been selected as part of the candidate pool. Nick was floored. Candidate for CEO. They've got the wrong guy. There's no way in hell I want to be CEO of whatever this is. Especially for a company that hires recruiters who kidnap their candidates, he thought to himself. The woman continued, before you were sent here. Each candidate had agreed to be a part of the interview process. You may not remember agreeing to this interview process. You may not remember much before you awoke. In actuality, do not worry, this is completely normal. In honor of fairness and equal opportunity, using the latest in nanotechnology, we have provided every candidate with a memnet, courtesy of our own Dr. Lethe. The woman is shifted to the side of the screen as an image of a brain appears. In the center, she points over to a specific part. Targeting the hippocampus, memnet alters the memories of a person, allowing them to form new memories, while also allowing us to block out others. This allows us to measure a person's raw aptitude, memories of past experiences, biases, and opinions of a company can influence decision-making during our interview process. By temporarily blocking these memories, we can assess our candidates based solely on their present qualities and skills. Nick scratched his beard as he thought to himself, "All right, so for some reason, I agreed to this interview process. If I can trust what they're saying, things must have been bad if I'm desperate enough to say yes to this." Nick did his best to think back to before he awoke, but was only greeted by faint glimpses of what struggled to be memories. Wanting to avoid a headache, Nick stopped and refocused back on the woman on the screen. "In a moment, we will be opening your doors to the waiting room, where I will explain the next steps in person. Before that, however, it must be made clear that this interview is, and will be for, the entire duration, voluntary. If you are feeling any second thoughts about this process, please push the red button near the side of this screen." The moment she says button, a small panel on the wall flips around, revealing a small, glowing button. At any time during the interview process, simply pressing the red button will emit a harmless gas into your room, which will put you to sleep. We will erase any memories of this place and return your old memories, and you will go back to the life you were living. Nick stood immediately and walked over to the button. "Yeah, no, I'm done with this," he decided in his head. Standing in front of the button, though, Nick hesitated. This is absolutely nuts. But Nick began to weigh his options. Alright, so clearly, this is weird. Understatement, but an opportunity to be a CEO. Maybe I'll stick around for a little bit. See what this is like. If I don't like it, I press the button, just like the woman said, right? Nick stood there for what felt like minutes, staring at his reflection in this small, red button. To his side, with a hiss and a click, the front door unlocked and swung open. Tentatively, he walked out of the room and into the hallway, where he was met by a few other people leaving their rooms, also dressed in the same grays as him. Wordlessly, as a collective, they all noticed there was only one way to go, and so the small crowd made its way down the hall. Unsurprisingly, the hallway opened up into a larger room, with more of the same gray architecture, with chairs and a raised stage with a podium where the woman from the television was standing, her smile like a beaming beacon. Looking up revealed a skylight with rolling clouds above. The group took their seats in front of the stage, murmuring awkward greetings to each other. The imposing man sitting next to Nick reached his large, calloused hand out to him. "Jimmy Uvaldine, at least. I think I'm Jimmy. Hard to say with all of this brain fog." He chuckled. "Nick Oldson," Nick replied, reciprocating the handshake politely. The man's grip matched his presence. Certainly one way to apply for a job, huh? Nick tried to match Jimmy's tone. Jimmy guffawed. "Hell, whatever happened to just filling out a form?" He nudged Nick, nearly toppling him. Their conversation was cut short the moment the woman at the podium raised her hand to get everyone's attention. An air of tension drifted through the room. The woman cleared her voice and began to speak. "On behalf of Sarastro's recruitment, thank you all for proceeding with this interview. My name is Hope, and I'll be in charge of your recruitment process. I know there are some questions and concerns you may have. The murmurs in the crowd seemed to agree. But hopefully I should be able to explain everything, as I've said in the recording. This process is entirely by choice. Your choice. Should you choose to remove yourself from the candidate pool, simply press the button in your room, and you will be escorted from the facility back to your old life. This opportunity will be present throughout the entirety of the interview process. She paused, as if to give people an opportunity to change their mind again. No one budged. Her smile grew as she continued. Now, I'm sure you guessed by now that this isn't a regular interview. She chuckled, as did some in the crowd. Now, due to the nature of our client company, they request that we carry out the interview to the level of caliber that they expect from us. You won't be answering simple questions or anything like that. Our goal is to test not what you know, but who you are. You need to align to the same standards and morals as the CEO of Umbrelith Holdings, if you wish to take the mantle. Jimmy spoke up, his voice rough around the edges. How are we supposed to show who we are if we don't even know what we had for lunch yesterday? His stout, hardened face scrunched as he spoke. His arms folded over his chest. Hope's smile never wavered, her attention now focused on him. Well, that's a great question, Jimmy, she began. Immediately, the man was on alert, arms now uncrossed. Now hold on. He was interrupted by Hope holding her hand up to pause him. She continued. You see, though you don't have recollection of your past memories, you're still you, who you've become, based on the decisions that you've made in your life. That's what we're measuring. Some of you may be more familiar with the company than others, and we're not here to measure how good you are at doing research about company figures and their mission statement. To your core, you need to match the values that Umbrelith Holdings desires. Now everyone has an equal playing field. Jimmy didn't seem satisfied with the answer, but didn't seem to protest any further either. Hope looked around the room, waiting to see if anyone else would speak up. A hand was raised from a woman near Nick. Hope acknowledged her. So what do we do? How will you know if we're the right one? She seemed more anxious than annoyed. Hope wasn't fazed at all by her question, as if expecting this to be the next natural thing to be asked. Simple, we're going to run simulations. Hope started. You'll be placed into different settings, situations, and your goal is to resolve them by whatever means you deem best. We'll monitor your progress within the simulation to see if you share the same viewpoints as the CEO of Umbrelith Holdings. A few different situations, and the best candidate will go on to take the position of CEO. As easy as that. Her words flowed in a sing-song pattern in a comforting way. She motioned behind the stage to a double set of doors. We'll lead you all into the simulation chambers and begin the first test, unless there are any questions first. Silence. Nick had a lot of questions, but felt it wasn't the time for them. Hope clapped her hands together. Perfect. No time like the present, right? This way. The double doors clicked and swung open as she motioned for the interviewees to stand and follow. Clumsily, Nick and the rest of the candidates walked onto the stage and into the dimly lit hallway after her. Immediately upon entering the hallway, Nick saw a bunch of men and women, each one standing in front of a door, holding a white board with a name on it. As they walked, Jimmy spotted his name and gave a friendly wave to the person holding it. The man smiled back and ushered Jimmy into the room. It didn't take long for Nick to find a short, red-haired woman holding a sign that read Nick Olson, and he stopped in front of her. Well, Nick, I assume, she asked, with a tone that felt more like a question than a statement. Unless there's another Nick Olson. He shrugged, with a smile. She brightened at his banter. Nope, just you. Come inside, she chirped, stepping out of his way, gesturing towards the door. He stepped inside. Thanks. He paused. Virginia, she stated, closing the door behind him. Inside the room felt like something out of a science fiction movie. A stark, white room, with a large chair in the middle, with some sort of high-tech machine sticking up from the top of the chair, like a hair-drying helmet from a salon. Virginia walked past Nick and stood in front of a console that resided next to the chair. She motioned towards the chair while she began tinkering with the dial and knobs at the console. "Have a seat, Mr. Oldson," she requested, her focus maintained on the task in front of her. Nick hesitated a moment before sitting carefully into the chair. It felt like one that you sit in at a doctor's office. Comfortable enough for the moment, but not enough to be actually comfortable. Nick decided to himself. "So, what? I attend a few virtual board meetings and potentially become a CEO." Nick smirked, looking over to Virginia to see her reaction. She smiled politely, in a customer service type of smile, and made eye contact with him. "Not exactly. These simulations are a bit more complex than that," she began. "Once inside, if ever you need some direction or want out, simply check your watch." She pointed to her own left wrist as she talked. "It'll be the only way to communicate with the outside world. Beyond that, you're on your own in there. Everything else isn't real. Simple enough, right?" She shrugged before going back to working at her console, which hissed and clicked with each interaction. Sure, being thrown into a simulation to do who knows what, for what is probably the world's weirdest interview, though I would have a hard time saying that, because the company also put my brain in a fog, just like any other Wednesday. Nick breathed out a sigh that shaped into a chuckle. Virginia nodded in satisfaction. "Now you're getting it." She walked over and lowered the contraption onto Nick's head. She pressed a button and waved as the hum of the machine began to pick up. "Goodloo." Her voice seemed to stretch, as did Nick's vision in the helmet, until everything faded to black. There was enough time for Nick to notice everything's gone dark, but not enough time for him to make another thought, before he found himself sitting at a bus stop on the sidewalk of a city. Nick blinked to unblur his vision. The city around him was bustling, akin to something like New York City. Nick looked down at his own clothing, now dressed in professional business attire. Crowds of people passed by the bus bench, seemingly having somewhere to be. Upon looking closer, he noticed all of the people walking by were faceless. He quickly checked his watch. It was a smartwatch, with the time and a written objective: wait for the bus. Simple enough, Nick thought to himself. Just need to wait for a bus to arrive. Not sure how they're going to measure anything with this first simulation. Lost in his thoughts, Nick was surprised when a woman on the phone sat next to him on the bench. She was clearly at the tail end of a heated conversation. To his continued surprise, when he looked over, she had a face. The young woman was beautiful and had long black hair with deep blue eyes. "Yeah, Dad, I know. Look, She frowned when she was cut off. Whatever the person on the other end was saying, the woman clearly seemed to shift to a resignation. "Yes, Dad, I understand. I promise. I'll talk to you soon. Love you." She hung up the phone and sighed, staring straight ahead. Nick let the silence hang for a moment, not sure if he should even say anything. He spoke before he could make up his mind. "Trouble at home?" he asked softly. "What? Oh, it's nothing." The woman jumped slightly when Nick spoke, as if he had knocked her out of a stupor. "Just, Dad's being protective." Nick raised his eyebrow. "Yeah, protective about what? About some boy you're seeing? I'm sure," he teased gently, trying to get the young woman to relax a little. It seemingly worked, as she giggled. "No, it's not that. Dad actually likes my boyfriend, considering he's the one who set me up with him." "What? Like some arranged marriage nonsense?" Nick couldn't hide the surprise and disdain in his voice. The woman was flustered. "Well, not quite. I guess. But it's okay. He's great. That's not the problem." The woman sighed to collect her thoughts. "Me and my boyfriend want to go to college. Learn whatever we can learn. Go out there and be something. But Dad, her eyes sink down for a moment. Dad wants us to stay with him on the farm. He wants me to promise that I won't go to school, that it'll be the end of me if I do go. Nick let out a mixture of a laugh and a scoff. You're kidding, right? Your dad just wants you to, what, help on the farm, or whatever? That's ridiculous. Is that what you want? He asked gently. Inside, Nick was steaming. Just because he's her father, he gets to tell her how to live her life. That's not right, he thought to himself. I mean, I love my dad, but... The woman sniffled. I know you haven't asked for my advice, but I'm going to give it to you anyway, Nick spoke up. Life's too short. You should do what you want to do. You want to learn. Go to school. Go for it. Will you make some mistakes along the way? Sure, everyone does. But then you learn from it. You pick yourself up, and you move forward. Look at me, he motioned to himself. I've made a slew of mistakes. Yet here I am, waiting on a bus. He paused. Well, I'm interviewing for a position of CEO. Really? The woman brushed her nose with the sleeve of her shirt. But what if my dad disowns me and my boyfriend? Then he's failed at being a supportive dad. Nick fired back firmly. A dad disowning his own kid and her boyfriend just because they wanted to better themselves, to get an education. Does that sound fair to you? Does that sound right? I guess not. The woman sullenly responds. Nick placed an arm on her shoulder. Listen, it's hard to drop family. I get it. They're blood. Sometimes, though, we need to do what's right for us. Build a group of people around you that'll support your interests. You and your boyfriend can go out there and meet new people. People who like you for who you are, who won't keep you boxed in, and at the same time, keep you grounded. Who knows? Your dad might even come around one day when he's seen how much you've grown. That sounds nice. The woman gives a light, genuine smile. Thank you. Nick shakes his head and waves dismissively. For what? I didn't do anything besides talk your ear off waiting for, as if it were there the whole time. Suddenly the bus was in front of them, hissing as the doors swung open. The woman stood and stepped up onto the stairs. She looked back at Nick. Well, in any case, good luck with your job interview. I'm Nick. He smiled warmly at her. Evelyn. She grinned back as he went to stand up. Time slowed, just like it did when he first entered the simulation, and his vision narrowed to a pinpoint. Before he knew it, he was back on the VR chair, the helmet rising up off his head, with Virginia typing away at the keyboard. Enjoyed this one? Subscribe now. The next episode is darker, and it's already waiting for you.